I picked a series out of 81. I picked a series out of 82. And then I thought, all right, we're up to 1983. This was the end of the Islanders' dynasty. And the Islanders, it's tough to find a series where they looked vulnerable, where they looked like maybe this was going to be it. So in 83, this is as close as I can get. Now, they did take 6 games to knock out the Boston Bruins. The Bruins were very tough, and I debated about whether or not to talk about Boston or whether or not to talk about this matchup with the Rangers. But this is a point in time where the Rangers are starting to hear those chants of 1940. And those 1940 chants will come from Islander fans. And so this was, of course, in reference to the fact the Rangers haven't won the championship since 1940. And if you look, it just fits on the board. This series just barely fits on the board. Yeah, 80s series had a lot of scoring in them. So getting these games to fit on the board, even with as little detail as I have in them, really, really difficult. But I made it work. Now, the New York Islanders during that regular season were 42, 26, and 12. 302 goals for, that's 15th overall in the NHL. 226 goals against, and that's first. And remember, this is out of 21 teams. They were 15th in their attack. Not only that, they had to make quite the run to finish with that record. So the New York Islanders, partway through 1983, it looked like they were basically done, and then they weren't. Now, the New York Rangers, 500 team, 35, 35, and 10. 306 goals for, which was 12th overall in the NHL, and 287 goals against, which is 8th. Kind of mediocre, and that's kind of where the Rangers spent a lot of the 80s, being kind of good, kind of not great, but good. And goaltending becomes an issue in this series, so we'll go ahead and go through it. Game 1, the New York Islanders come out strong, and they look like a 3-time Stanley Cup champion, I should say. This was them going for their 4th. Power play goal scored in the first, however, by the Rangers by Ron Greshner from Mark Pavlich and Anders Hedberg at 13:01. So 1-0 for the Rangers after 1. Second period, it's Stefan Persson scoring from Anders Kaller and Denny Potvin. That's a power play goal at 5:43. So both teams with power play markers in the opening 2 periods, and it's a 1-1 draw. Third period, the Islanders put it away. It's what they do. Denny Potvin scores from Brent Sutter and Bob Bourne at 1:44. Bob Bourne would have 12 points in 6 games in this series. So, pretty good series for him. And the Sutter brothers did pretty well as well on his line. Brent Sutter from Dwayne Sutter and Bourne at 4:27. And then on the power play, it's Dwayne Sutter from Bourne and Brent Sutter at 8:05. That makes it 4-1, and that's your final. Eddie Mio, 29 saves on 33 shots for the Rangers. Billy Smith, 19 saves on 20 shots. Everything's going really well for Billy Smith at this stage. Now we go to game 2, and the Islanders just put it down, and it looks like this is going to be a nice, easy, quick series. First period, John Tonelli from Bob Nystrom at 54 seconds. So the Islanders letting him know right out of the gate, yeah, no, we're going to win this. Then it's a power play goal by Dwayne Sutter from Janssen at 8:19. Thomas Janssen, I believe. And then Dwayne Sutter scores again from Bob Bourne at 15:33. So Dwayne Sutter on his way to a hat trick. Second period, Brent Sutter scores from Bourne and Denny Potvin at 8:02, and then Dwayne Sutter completes the hat trick from Bourne and Brent Sutter at 15:26. That line absolutely fantastic. Notice very little mention of Trottier to this stage. So one of their best top scoring forwards, not really needed at that stage of the series. Third period, no scoring. Your final score is 5-0. Glenn Hanlon, 42 saves on 47 shots for him. This would be the only action he would see in the series, I do believe. Double checking. Yeah, that's the only action he sees. And Billy Smith, 23 saves for the shutout. So this was a swarm. They outshot the Rangers by more than 2-1, and the Rangers were just overwhelmed for most of the night. So they go home for game 3. And the Rangers make it a lot harder on themselves than they needed to, but not early. First period, Bossy scores on the power play from Kaller and Janssen at 5:06, and then power play strikes for the Rangers. It's George McPhee. Yes, that George McPhee from Anders Hedberg and Dave Maloney at 7:14. It's then John Stone scoring from Dave Maloney and Mike Allison at 8:46, also on the power play. So 3 power play goals in the first 10 minutes. And this one's a crazy, wacky game. But shorthanded, the Islanders tie it up. Bob Bourne from Carroll and Billy Smith at 11:03. So, like yesterday's, we see goaltenders getting into the scoring of things. Ron Duguay would restore a lead for the Rangers from George McPhee and Backman at 13:08. And then it's a 2-goal lead as Barry Beck scores from Duguay and Ruotsalainen at 17:45. So it's 4-2 for the Rangers after 1. Yeah, insane score. Second period, Maloney scores from Allison and Don Maloney at 2:11. This is the only point Don Maloney had in this series. All the other points are Dave Maloney. Johnstone would then score shorthanded for the New York Rangers at 4 minutes and 12 seconds. And this was after they'd switched goaltenders. So the Islanders, after going down 5-2 early in the second, said, all right, and they put in Rolly Melanson. Now, me as a little kid, I thought Rolly Melanson was the better goaltender. Honest. Telling you guys the honest truth. 1983, I thought Rolly Melanson was the better goaltender than Billy Smith, and I didn't understand why Billy Smith got so much ice time compared to Melanson in the regulars in the playoffs compared to the regular season where Melanson started a lot. Now, hearing myself say it now, I'm like, that's ridiculous. Billy Smith, Hall of Famer. Melanson had a good career, sure, but not Hall of Fame level and shouldn't have been up there. But yeah, that's how I felt at the time. Pavelich would score before the end of the period. Power play goal from him, from Greshner, and Kleinendorst at 13:20. So yeah, Kleinendorst. There's a good name for you. You have to play hockey with the name Kleinendorst. So that makes it 7-2 for the Rangers after 2. Now, I'm not going to say that the team drank it between the second and third period. I'm not going to say the team took the third period lightly. But boy howdy, was that third period insane. It's a shorthanded goal for Billy Carroll at 2:33. That's not supposed to happen. Then Mike Bossy scores unassisted at 4:55. Also not supposed to happen. And then again, shorthanded. The third shorthanded goal of the game for the New York Islanders. Anders Kaller at 8:36. You're getting power plays in the third. You're supposed to be killing a couple minutes of the clock and getting closer to a win. Not the Rangers. And then Potvin would score on the power play in the last minute from Bourne and Bossy at 19:17, just to make sure it's a nail biter. And yet, it really shouldn't have been. Really, really shouldn't have been. So the Rangers win this one 7-6. But they'd been leading 7-2 going into the third period. That's a messy game. So Smith saves 18 out of 23. Now here's the thing. He allowed 5 goals. Melanson allowed the 7th. So even though he saved 17 out of 19, it's his loss. Eddie Mio saves 27 out of 33. He gets a win, but not an impressive one. So I don't know whether it's his pride or what it is, but he plays much better in Game 4. Again, still in New York at Madison Square Garden. George McPhee scores in the first of that game from Duguay and Beck at 2:51. For if you don't know who Ron Duguay is, that means I need to do a video on him, because Ron Duguay is a very interesting person in terms of NHL history. Second period, Mark Pavelich scores from Anders Hedberg at 10:40, and that makes it a 2-0 lead for the Rangers. Ruotsalainen scores at 12:44. Reijo Ruotsalainen, I remember him being a very good offensive defenseman. I don't think the defensive side of his game was great, but good offensive defenseman. The Oilers picked him up at one point. Not at this point, obviously. And then Greg Gilbert scores from Dwayne Sutter and Brent Sutter before the end of the period, and that makes it 3-1. But in the third period, the Rangers did what they couldn't do in the third period of Game 3. Hold it. So we're in a 2-2 series tie now. Melanson saves 19 out of 22 in the loss. Eddie Mio saves 36 out of 37 in the victory. So much better numbers for Eddie Mio, although throughout the series, there's some scary numbers put up by Eddie Mio. So we go to Game 5. We're in New York at Nassau, Islanders hockey, and the Islanders didn't leave much doubt coming out of this game. Trottier scores from Morrow and Nystrom at 13:18. Ken Morrow, known for his 4 Stanley Cups. Also, I knew him for the fact that I had his rookie card. Not in great condition, but his rookie card, because it had the USA logo in the corner. So everybody was part of the Miracle on Ice team. They put the USA logos, like Rob McClanahan and players like that, Jim Craig, and they put the little USA logo in the corner. So to me, Ken Morrow, I was like, oh, the USA guy, because as a kid, that was the association I made with it. Ruotsalainen would then score from Kleinendorst at 18:45. So before the end of the first period, it's a tie game. The Rangers on the road. If they can steal this game, the series could still be theirs. Second period, power play for the Islanders. Just the thought of who you can put on a power play for the Islanders at that stage is intimidating. Mike Bossy scores from Potvin and Trottier at 4:01. So a Hall of Famer from a Hall of Famer and a Hall of Famer. Gord Lane then scores from Brent Sutter and Bob Bourne at 9:22. I mentioned Bourne having a great series, and here he is again. Dwayne Sutter scores from Bob Bourne and Brent Sutter at 11:42. Not Brian, Brent Sutter. They're all brothers. It's easy to mix one up with the others. Like I keep saying Dwayne because I don't want to say Daryl. Bob Bourne then scores from Janssen at 18:35, and it is an absolute slaughter at this point. It is 5-1. But last minute, Robbie Fatorik, yes, that Robbie Fatorik, he scores from Leinonen and Laidlaw at 19:40. So Tom Laidlaw on the board. I don't know that he's ever got on any of my boards till now, but there's Tom Laidlaw. There he is. Third period, and the if there was any tension, it was done with early. Brent Sutter scores from Bourne and Dwayne Sutter at 2:32 as that line continues to absolutely decimate the Rangers in Nassau. I keep wanting to say in New York, but they're both New York. Potvin then really just to add more pain to the Rangers fans. He scores from Goring and Brent Sutter at 10:20. Eddie Mio saves 36 out of 43. Billy Smith saves 18 out of 20. And coming back to goaltenders, I was really surprised during this series they didn't use Hanlon more. I thought Hanlon was the better goaltender. Again, just one kid's opinion at the time. I could say man's, but I wasn't a man at the time. I was a little kid. I thought Hanlon was the better goaltender. I couldn't figure out why Eddie Mio got the chances over Hanlon. I remember, because Hanlon had been a goaltender in Vancouver, so when he moved around, I followed him because I thought, he's a good goaltender. I want to see what he does. And he had his chances. Again, it's definitely a career video I can do at some point is on Glenn Hanlon because it's fascinating. Good goaltender with good numbers, and he struggled to find a starting job in the NHL at times, many times. So we go back to Madison Square Garden, and the Rangers desperately need a victory, and they come out really well. Their first period is good. Ron Duguay scores from McPhee and Backman at 12:45. So the Rangers come out of the first period with a 1-0 lead. We could be going to Game 7 in Nassau. But in the second period, this is where the Islanders start to pick things up. Tonelli scores from Goring and Morrow at 4:02. Then it's Butch Goring scoring from Tonelli at 5:03. If it's a big game, Butch Goring's your guy. Butch Goring, very, very well known as being the first of the trade deadline pickups. We talk a lot about trade deadline deals, and where did it all start? It started with Butch Goring, going from the Kings to the Islanders. And he was with all four of those Stanley Cup champions, and he was a key part of them. But the Rangers would score before the halfway mark. It's a power play goal for Leinonen from Hedberg and Beck at 9:31. So it's still a tie game going to the third. The Rangers need this game so they can go back to Nassau, so they can be 3-0 at home. This is a series where every home team had won till this point. But Butch Goring, I mentioned him, right? He gets what would prove to be the game winner from Nystrom and Tonelli at 5:21. Brent Sutter then scores from Gord Lane and Dwayne Sutter at 8:09, showing how offensively gifted the 80s were. Gord Lane, not a guy who scored points. Really not. And so the fact that Lane ends up on the board so many times in this series shows you just how many goals were being scored and just how gifted the Islanders were as well. Ken Morrow then scores at 14:09 to finish any hopes of a comeback for the New York Rangers. And your final score in that one is 5-2 for the New York Islanders. The 1940 curse would continue for the Rangers. As I go through this series, we will talk about the Rangers, I'm sure, again. Smith saved 28 out of 30 in the victory. Billy Smith, if there was any concern coming out of this debacle here, that is quickly put away through the rest of the series. Eddie Mio saves 39 out of 44 in the loss, and the Rangers are left scratching their heads and wondering what they're going to do, and soon they'll turn to Phil Esposito for answers on that, and that turns into a whole other schmozzle, which I've talked about in history videos in previous summers. I know it's not summer yet, but it kind of feels like it, doesn't it? So there you go. The New York Islanders, they survived the scare, they hold serve at home, and they won Game 6 when they needed to. And this really is, in my eyes, about as close as anybody got to knocking them off in 83. They would lose in the Stanley Cup Final in 84, but they won 19 series in a row. Nobody will ever do that again. I feel perfectly safe and confident in saying it is a record that will never be equaled. It is a record that players from those teams talk about, and rightfully so. They should talk about it because 19 series wins in a row is crazy. And it is something we'll never see again. And there you go. So the New York Islanders, New York Rangers, 1983. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.